Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Over the Lines. I'm Arton James, author of the upcoming football novel Foul, which comes out Friday. I am joined today by Dr. Lee McGowan, senior lecturer on creative writing and critical football studies over at the University of, where is it? It's the Gold Coast, right?
Sunshine Coast. The Sunshine Coast in
Coast.
Queensland.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Lee joins me as an expert on football fiction who has written a book called Football in Fiction, and also, was it more recently that you've written a book on the history? You tell me.
Aye. So the two books, I wrote the two books within about both within a period of about 6 months last year. So, but obviously there's a bit of research went on in them prior to them being delivered. So that doesn't sound that sounds more impressive than it actually is. The first book published was the Women that 100 Years of History of Women's Football here in Australia. Women have been playing the game here since 1921, just as the game was getting really popular in England in particular. And so because there's this undocumented history of the game here, my colleague Fiona Crawford and I put that together. And 10 years ago, I did a PhD on football in fiction. I got really tired of people telling me there wasn't any good football novels, or reading people saying there's not any good football novels, when I knew that there were already some really brilliant football novels. And so I decided to go and have a look, and in the end, the search led me to, 600 odd football novels, and then other works that have been translated from other languages and stuff like that, And so I took the PhD research and then added to that with other people's research and plus my own, and wrote the academic text on. It's a history, effectively, it's not necessarily a global history, because I can only speak English, and even barely at that, Arton, as you can hear for yourself. But there's certainly a lot more of it. There's a Booker Prize shortlistee on there from the late 60s. Robin Jenkins' work, the Thistle and the Grail, that was published in 1954, is probably still one of the best novels I've ever read in my life. Really deserving of any literary award. And then other people have joined the ranks more recently. David Peace's work on Leeds and then Liverpool were both absolutely magnificent. Well, Bill Shankly and Brian Clough, both absolutely magnificent pieces of literature, like proper, bona fide, fully qualified literature. And so my interest is in this idea that Brian Glanville, who's a big football writer, or was, he's probably one of the most prolific football writers the world's ever seen. He said that the very act of writing about a sport that was a working class sport denied it the capacity to ever be described as in literary terms, And so I'm from a housing estate in central Scotland, that's been a bugbear for me all my life, because there is really brilliant football literature. So it's brilliant to see people like yourself continue to add to the kind of wealth of stories about the game we love.
Yeah, it's interesting, because even as I was writing this, I didn't delve too deeply into research in other football literature. I'm not a big reader. I read a lot of non-fiction down the years, but I've not been a big fictional reader. I've absorbed all of my fiction through TV and film. So I was surprised at how difficult it was when I decided to do a little bit of research into football fiction, that there really wasn't, it wasn't easy to find. So say, for example, on Amazon, where the world buys most of its books now, have you ever typed into the search bar football fiction or sports fiction?
Aye. I spent my entire PhD and probably most of the last decade doing that to see what's new.
Have you seen that the majority of what comes up is actually sports erotica? Have you seen
Oh
those?
no, I haven't dealt that far into it. But you know,
Oh no, that's what comes up on
eh,
the initial searches now. That's what comes up on the initial searches. If you search football fiction or sports fiction, the vast
oh,
majority of the
really?
books that come up are kind of
I'm going to try that.
yeah, you'll see for yourself that they tend to be naked male
So that
torsos.
I go onto the Amazon search.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh yeah. I know. Like I talked to some of this in my book in terms of because there's even like one of the things that digital publishing allows us to do is to really target niche audiences, and so we're seeing that there's a publishing label in North America that specialises in writing lesbian fiction or fiction written by women, romantic fiction written by women for other women to read, and specifically other women to read. And so there's a branch of that in there that's just about lesbian footballers, you know, and so it's like that's really niche, and you can see how the market allows us to drill down into those. I've
yeah.
got Amazon up here on my computer. I'm just going to put football fiction in it. But aye, there's a really there's a I don't know what it is, but there's a big market in sports fiction. You know, it doesn't come. Oh, I suppose there's these ones, Freedom Falls and stuff like that. You know,
Yeah, they
they
practically
certainly came up
own
hands down. Yeah.
they own the
And
sports
it's
fiction genre.
so if you put any there, yeah.
It was quite entertaining.
If you, it depends on where in the world you are.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I mean, you can get. Yeah, it depends on where you are in the world. You know, if you put that into Australia, you get something different because football here's rugby league and rugby union are
Of
both
course.
described as football here. So you
Of
get
course.
something different. Then if you're in North America, it's all about North American football. So it depends where you are, which Amazon you're looking at and stuff like that. Aye, but
Yeah.
it used to be before when I first started doing my PhD, one of the biggest categories of football or football fiction was actually the kind of fan fiction, porn fiction, you know, like, and there was loads of that stuff around. But actually published, so that's why I had to say in my PhD, I'm focusing on what's been published, you know, rather than what had just been written and uploaded to the internet in places. So
Of
obviously the
course.
market's changed a bit since then too. But
Uh-huh.
I've included some of the early ones that were published years ago, and in terms of that kind of cheap, well, not cheap necessarily, but that easily replicable, popular that genre of fiction, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where sports and erotic has been tied together. There's a brilliant case where I read about this a couple of years ago, where because people are often get embarrassed about buying erotic fiction, some um, exploitative writers have taken advantage of that. So they'll buy a copy of a book, rip it off completely, give it a new name, a new author's name, and then repost it back onto Amazon as something completely different. So you don't even know if you're buying a different book or not sometimes, you know.
Wow.
So you have to be careful of that stuff too.
That's incredible. So yeah, my early searches for football fiction and sports fiction were kind of not drawing blanks, but there really wasn't a lot to be found. So when I came across your stuff, you know, your book Football in Fiction, that catalogues basically the entire English written genre, I was like, oh, I probably should have read this a long time ago. So how did you come to have such a fascination in this that you spent like years of your life researching it?
Um, uh, so two things. I've always been a massive football fan, and I've always been I've always been obsessed with reading and writing. The two go hand in hand. I think you can't. You need to be able to read a lot and across a diverse range of things to learn to write well. I think so. I was like, when you said, "Oh, most of my stuff's been through television and movies and stuff," I was like, "Aye, that's reflective of how much younger you are than me." You know, like that there's the exposure to the written word is generally through a screen now, rather than through a library, you know. So I remember reading a short story when I was 11. It was about this footballer who was so good, right, that the authorities, in the same way that film that James Caan was in, Rollerball.
Yeah.
Aye, classic from the late 70s, right? You know, and it was like he'd become bigger than the game, and so the football authorities felt like this player, who was a kind of rip-off of Pele, had become bigger than the game itself, and everybody was going to watch him. World Cup final. They devised this magic technology where they put it in the ball, and as he lined up to take a free kick, they activated it, and a spectacular curling free kick didn't happen. He was frozen in time, and so that was the end of his football career and all that. Now I'm telling you that because it was a kind of pre-Beckham-esque style free kick. Do you know, like it was like this incredible thing. And I'd written about it on my blog. I wrote a blog for a few years when I was doing my PhD, all about football fiction. Usually publish something every couple of weeks, right? It's still available, I think, on Blogger if you can find it. But this person wrote to me and said, I know that story you're talking about. Here's the name of it and here's the author. And I was like, I didn't want to go near it, because what if it changed the way I thought about things, you know, like especially after I just finished my PhD. But and so that kind of, those two combined fascinations between the game and the written word, and you know, like I'm no intellectual giant by any means. You know, if I was a character in Animal Farm, I'd be Boxer. You know, like I can carry things. I'm a really hard worker. I can carry heavy things for a long time, and I was the same on the football pitch. I was always a right back or a left back. You know, like win the ball and then give it to one of our midfield creative players. That was my job. You know, and so I'd be standing on the football pitch going, I wonder what that would look like on paper if I was to describe that. So I spent most of my life doing that. And then when I was doing my masters, a guy said to me, hey, do you know what you need to do? You need to pick something that you really love and research something that you really love. And I was like, I've always fancied writing some football, stories about football and all that. And he said, don't do that, because no one here likes football, right? Because it's Australia. And that just made me go, yeah, of course I'm going to do that, right? You know, you just told me not to. And then, and so I wrote a kind of a manuscript for my masters. While I researched some football novels, about 50 football novels, and I thought I'd unpacked a few in the first couple of months, but then I was like, I found loads more, you know. And so when that manuscript for my masters got shortlisted for the Queensland Premier's Literary Award out here, which is a good award to win. There's no money in it, but you know, like you said before we get on recording, it gets you noticed. And so once what it did more importantly was it got me onto a PhD program and got me a scholarship. And the early research I'd done on my masters led beautifully into a much larger project around my PhD. And instead of focusing on writing another novel, which I did anyway, and it's rubbish, it's still in a drawer. No, it really is. I completely. I just fell in love with the research and the looking for things and finding things, and I loved reading the theory and how you could take the theory and then apply that to what you were looking at. And I just that was me then. I think I just fell in love with being a researcher, and I've always been curious anyway, you know. So now I'm doing a job that actually allows me to do the thing I'm probably most naturally interested in doing. And if it's about football and it's about writing, then it's right in the sweet spot of the kind of Venn diagram, you know. And so I know it's really nerdy, right? But then when I was doing my PhD, honestly, some of the novels I read were absolutely dross, right? But then there's just some brilliant stuff that you find that just takes your brain to a different place. A guy called Johnson, B something Johnson. He wrote a book. It's 29 pamphlets that come in a box, right? And the first chapter and the last chapter are stuck to the inside covers of the box, but you can read the other 27 chapters in whatever order you want them to. J.B. Johnson, right? His name is. The book's called The Unfortunates, and it's this kind of brilliant piece of experimental literature that was written in 1969 that people are looking at now for transmedia stories and stuff like that, as a kind of narrative you could choose to read in any order you wanted to. And there was just this guy going, what if a novel could be written in a way that wasn't linear? And so you're going, if that can be done in football fiction, then that means that football's got something that other things don't, right? But really, I think what really was interesting for me was kind of what do we do when there's no football on, right? So I'd spend my summer reading in that. Do you know what I mean? I'd be in the park during the day with my pals, and then I'd get home and I'd want to read. And so I was like, how do you continue that? I love this love of football, and so telling stories was that thing, and that's just stayed with me since I was a wee boy. Plus, as well, right, going to watch the football with my Uncle Brian. He's probably probably one of the biggest influences on my life. Politics, music, like the understanding of social justice and all that. I don't think he realises how deeply that had an impact on me. But I used to go to the football with him on the Celtic bus. And while we're on the Celtic bus, the boys would be singing the Rebel songs, and then they'd be like, I remember, wee man, you can't take that tape and play that. And, like if the police would come up to the bus, you had to turn the tunes down and all that. There was this kind of, they were illegal and all that. And so that made me wonder why. And then so I learned about the kind of way that people were treated in Northern Ireland, and so that made me go, well, that's not very fair, is it? What does that mean? And so that's where I got an education in Irish politics, then, which naturally led into socialism, and looking for reasons why the world wasn't fair, and obviously wanting to fix some of that too. I was a youth and community worker when I was living in Scotland, and then coming out here, like straight into a kind of middle class environment where we've got two wages coming into the house, cars, kids in schools that we're paying for and all that. Like, how do you help people there? So university is a good place to do that, as any, So it's and it's all because of my Uncle Brian and the football that I've got to this point, where you can be in the system and against it at the same time. And thanks to him,
So you see football and football fiction as a vehicle towards a more just society.
Aye, so right. If you obviously this has changed a bit in the last since the 90s, really, but especially in the last 10 years. I honestly think the EPL is a circus now. It doesn't even feel like football anymore. Do you know, like it feels like I'm watching a cartoon when I watch it, and the stuff that happens around it, boys making £200,000 a week and all that. That's not where football started. It was the working man's game. It was a means of entertainment on a Saturday afternoon after boys had worked 6.5, 7 days a week. They got to go to the game on a Saturday afternoon and have a couple of pints with their mates. That's where it was. And this where we are now, where clubs are selling 3 strips before the season starts, pressuring fans to buy all sorts of other merchandise and kind of using that kind of community, that sense of community against the communities that need the support, rather than be giving their money to a large commercial organisation that's never going to run out of money because it's backed by a Russian oligarch or a Saudi Arabian oil conglomerate or a Malaysian businessman, and it just kind of, it makes me think, like football's drifted so far away from what it was in the first place. It's whereas that's why I'm really interested in the women's football, because it's not like that yet. There's the same level of cynicism, the same level of exploitation, isn't there? And when I say exploitation, I don't just mean of the punters watching it who love their clubs. I mean of the young boys, that are getting sucked into these team organisations when they're 13, 14, being kind of led to believe that they can make it and make huge amounts of money. The ones that make it 16 get paid stupid money that turns their head, and their careers are finished before they're 18. And so very few of them actually make it to the big time, but it's always held up as this example. And meanwhile, the big clubs in the top end, the 5 big leagues in Europe, are scooping up all the money and keeping it for themselves while everybody else is struggling, you know, and it's all kind of, I don't know, it doesn't feel genuine anymore. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the Men's World Cup doesn't feel genuine anymore either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you've got the FIFA pressuring the Brazilian government to change their laws so you can sell Budweiser in the stadiums and all that, so you can have the tournament. That means we've moved away from what football is. For me, football's always been about sense of community, about a really simple language that people from any walk of life can understand straight away and connect over. You know, I remember playing a game of football in Istanbul. A team of guys like myself, just having a kick around in a park against a team of Turkish guys. None of us could speak the same language. Do you know what I mean? I think it was me and one English guy in that team versus the Turkish boys, and it was just like Taksim Square it was in. It wasn't even a park. We were just having a kick around. I was like, this is what football's for. And I know that's kind of idealistic and romantic and that, but that's how I see it. It's always a source of community, not a source for people to capitalise on. Sorry, that got really political there, didn't it?
No. I asked you about it being a vehicle towards a more just society. So,
so actually coming back to the topic in the first place, I think football. I don't know if you've seen that the English Game or something it's called, or you know, it's on Netflix. They've made a series about two Scottish boys that come down to play for the factory teams, right?
I think I've seen an advert.
Yeah, look, it's pretty good, right? It's pretty good, and it's based on kind of elements of factual history, you know, and the Northern English clubs were traditionally really successful. The Southern English clubs, where the teams were based out of the big expensive schools, right? They invented the rules. It was a gentleman's game, you know, like, and it was, so you kept it amateur. People couldn't bet on it officially or anything like that, you know, and so they were worried that if you started paying players wages to play football, and then that would lead to corruption and gambling and pressures on the game from external forces, you know. So it's went from being this kind of aristocratic pursuit that was juxtaposed with the working man, an opportunity for him to rise above his station, and these kind of brilliant tensions to be in this thing where it's now just for the rich almost. Do you know what I mean? Because who can afford to spend £700 a year on a season ticket, you know, and another £100 on a strip?
That's if you're lucky as well. I'm an Arsenal fan. You know, I rarely go. I live in London. I rarely go. I can't afford to go. Yeah, you know, you're looking at 80 odd quid for a ticket.
Shit.
Yeah, and I mean to kind of double down on what you're talking about, it becoming accessible at the top level. Even at the bottom level, it's less accessible than it was when I was a teenager. So when I was a teenager, there's a school behind my parents' house. It was open. You could go and play on the playground, play on the fields in the summer, and we would be out there all day, every day. Now, towards the end of my teenage years, they shut the school off. They fenced it all. And now where I'm from, like, there is nowhere really, or there are very few spaces that a kid can go and play without paying. You know, the rise of AstroTurf facilities and the fencing off of what were previously public areas means that even at the bottom level, it's inaccessible. So unless you've got a family that have some disposable income to pay for you going to play football in a more structured environment as well, like, it's not just a case of it being paid for, but also, like, it is structured. There will be referees, there will be coaches. Like, there aren't that many spaces that kids can just go and play by themselves anymore. So I think even at the bottom level, it's becoming less accessible.
Yeah, I was listening to an interview just recently. This was with old Celtic players, you know, and one of the questions that the old player was asked was, how come there was so many brilliant footballers when you were growing up? And he said, that's all we did. We had a ball. And so you had that ball with you all day long. Do you know, like, you practically slept with it, you know, and so being out in the park and learning the tricks and showing off to your mates and that level of competition just in the park, and I really kind of free environment, is where it all developed. It's a completely different game now. But back to the football fiction. So what one of the things I love about football fiction is that its ability to speak back or speak against the establishment. The Robin Jenkins novel that I talked about, a working class writer writing about religion and the politics of football back in the 1950s. Alan Sillitoe's The Match looks at these two boys from either Lancashire or Yorkshire. I don't want to get them mixed up in case I upset people, but like same things about two guys going to a game. And so you start to see that in Barry Hines' work in the 1960s and that, where it's actually about the people, who are living in terraced houses, making a wage off the pit, or one wage coming in the house and all that. And so you see these writers emerging where you see the sport through the eyes of people whose lives it was most impacting, and I think that's one of the things that football fiction has been able to do. Even before that, in the 1920s, there was this brilliant kind of like almost feels like an anomaly. But so football fiction in the 1920s was really about those boys on adventure stories, right? Like every now and then the star striker would get kidnapped by baddies, like who were going to hold him hostage because he was obviously going to make the difference and their team would get beat, or the bookies weren't happy because he'd shot them the odds, so they'd take him out of the game and all that, and you get them. But so at the same time as those stories were being published aimed at young men, there's this whole kind of seam of stories that were written about women's football teams, because obviously women's football had become immensely popular during the First World War, right up until they got banned in the 1921. And so, but these women's teams and these women's players, it was often all about change, right? Whether it was gender, defying the odds by being a team, and quite often the stories would be like, the women have got together to play football, and that's allowed them to find collective bargaining power in the factory, so they could argue for better wages and all that, which was something you never saw in the men's football. So it was almost like the women's stories had to have more than football in them to be interesting, but the football was a key vehicle in it. And so, like as I said, that speaking back against convention, like turning over what we understood as literature in the 1950s, and then right up you see the likes of Irvine Welsh and John King and that writing books about fans on the terraces that are a kind of a subversive, transgressive look through literature at society and culture, like mainstream culture, to where you've got boys like now, like David Peace writing incredibly popular works of outstanding literary merit that are immersed in football culture, and then at the same time as that, there's Dougie Brimson's sequel to or threequel to his trilogy about the Crew, the West Ham fans, the gangsters, that they're entrenched in football culture as well. So it offers this kind of brilliant spectrum of different kinds of story, but it's always across history been a vehicle for to speak back against power, speak truth to power, like journalists are supposed to do. So that's one of the things I love about it. When you ask me what fascinates it about me, and it's that, it's the writer's ability to do that, the opposite of what Glanville said,
Mm-hmm. Well, on Glanville's comments, like I must say that my personal experience kind of I don't know. I grew up on a council estate, like you. Reading wasn't a big thing at all. Like I say, I've read a lot of non-fiction, but fiction was never. I don't know whether it was just my household or like the wider culture of where I lived. When we were introduced to literature at school, it was Shakespeare, and it was
Thomas
stuff.
Hardy.
Probably, I don't even remember, but it wasn't something that I ever associated with, because it was very, everything was through the lens of a GCSE syllabus and was never designed to engage people like me. So it's been surprising to me kind of 20 years later to realize that some of the people I respect most in the world were writers. It's only then that it dawned on me that that was something that I wanted to do. So I do see that there's a big class issue around kind of people writing fiction, but especially like football and literature, you know, in your mind are kind of one and the same. In my mind, I still struggle with the relationship between the two, even though I have just, you know, written this and written it in previous forms. So it's really, really interesting to me.
Well, so I don't know if they're not always one and the same, right? Generally, literature is often seen as being separate from genre fiction, right? Which is the more kind of populist, mainstream stuff that we buy before we go on holidays and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so, for me, there's always been an elitist snobbery around football writing, right? Because some of them genre novels are absolutely brilliant, and I just think it's really interesting that my understanding of football writing is happening alongside an understanding that genre fiction doesn't have to necessarily be just mainstream populist fiction. Like literature writers are approaching subjects and genres in ways that would have been frowned on in the past. You know, you're getting literary novelists writing crime novels now. Kazuo Ishiguro, who Remains of the Day, won the Booker Prize, been shortlisted for it a couple of times, wrote a fantasy novel a couple of years ago, you know, and so it's kind of like the distinction between genre fiction, you know, and literature has blurred quite a lot in the last 10, 20 years. And so we're starting to see all sorts of different things happen in fiction that would have defied the categorization that was in place before. So I think that it's important to understand that football writing as such occurs on a spectrum. So even if whether that's fiction or non-fiction, there's these literary writers writing, like Jonathan Wilson, absolutely fantastic writer, writes for The Guardian, right? The boy Barney Roney writes for The Guardian, just fantastic writers. David Goldblatt's book, fantastic writers, but they're writing in ways now that's really accessible to just your average football punter who would be interested in what's happening, you know, and ways that make us think about the game in different ways as well. Like Jonathan Wilson's books are brilliant and all that, but I think though that what Glanville does have a point in that people who've spent their life, especially now as we've talked about, who've spent their life being coached into a football system or a school system that's discouraged them from looking at literature, means that there's less likelihood that people who are involved in the game directly in that way are going to write about that experience in the way that was happening in the 50s, you know. So books like yours are really important because they're speaking about experience that you've had yourself. So, like, cause I wanted you to tell me a bit more about how you got involved in the process. So could you, like, what brought you to writing about football yourself?
So like I say, all I did was play football growing up. I coached. I tried to get into football at a late age. Didn't work out. I then ended up working around the fringes of football as a kind of rehabilitation consultant. Worked a little bit in the Premier League and ran the Championship. Like, I have loved the game, but grew somewhat dissatisfied with a lot of the things around it, as you kind of alluded to having done. And so a few years ago, when I started to consider that maybe I would want to write something, like, one of the things that's said in a lot of texts on writing, you know, there's the cliche saying, write what you know. And at the time, the thing that I knew best was football. So that's how I came about writing what I've written. And as I mentioned to you before, the book that I've written originally was a script. TV and film have been my medium. medium of
Yeah,
choice
yeah.
growing
So
up.
same again, writing what
Yeah,
you know, same
yeah,
again,
yeah.
right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So it's evolved over the last kind of 2 years, and now it's a novel. I forget what your actual question was. I don't know if I've gone off on
No,
some
I was
sort of
just asking
tangent.
how you've come to. No, no, you're all right. I was just asking how you've come to write about write a football novel yourself. You know, so
Mm.
all the pieces all make sense. You've been involved with the game, I'd imagine, for a few years as well, and then by the sounds of things, and obviously you're a big fan of story, right? Particularly screen medium. So that's brought you to write a script for a TV show. I think you said.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
Started off as a
so
TV script, went into a movie script, had some encouragement, but ultimately didn't go anywhere. And I thought to myself, this needs to see the light of day, but obviously I don't have the money to, the thing with TV and cinema is you need massive backing to make things happen. And it just so happened that the particular story that I wanted to tell does occur in the elite game. It doesn't happen at Sunday League level. So it wasn't like I could go and make a short out of the same story or anything like that.
yeah.
So I thought the only way this will see the light of day properly is for it to be novelised.
Brilliant, man. And so can you give us a brief outline on what the book's about? Is it all right to talk about elements of it?
Yeah, I mean, I would call it a drama thriller. I would say that it's more of an ensemble piece. You're looking at multiple characters rather than one, but I do have an A story and a B story. It's primarily about a kind of idealistic, somewhat meek manager who has came from a career. He's a brilliant player who didn't win anything, and he's on the brink of winning a trophy with a minnow team in the top league, and things start to get somewhat complicated.
Brilliant.
So yeah, I'll be really interested to know, like, if eventually you read it, where you would see it fitting into genre, because in your book, Football in Fiction, you lay out kind of the genres, what makes football fiction, what makes literary football fiction, what makes genre football fiction.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be really interested to know from someone who knows the field inside out, where you think mine fits, because as a independent author, to know how to categorize things is useful. Like at the moment, if people ask me, what's your book like? Without like giving too much of the story away, like what else is it like? My only real reference points are film. So I would say I've gone for quite a realist tone. So something like The Damned United is probably a better fit than, say, something like I don't know. Well, I've not written Mike Bassett, England manager. I've not written Footballers' Wives. I've written something
But
with. Go on.
no, I was just going to say, well, that's because one of the things I think that football writing, the best football writing carries is that level of authenticity that you've just talked about. So because you've been in and around the game, that usually works really well in terms of the stories, because you can bring something to it that somebody like me who's a fan, just looking from the outside, wouldn't necessarily get a sense of.
I've
And so,
worked around the fringes. I don't want to overstate my involvement, like really inside the machinations of the professional game. But I've been around it a little bit. I would
yeah.
term myself as more of a fan than like a football professional. But yeah, I have floated around the fringes of it. I just
Whereas footballers' wives and Mike Bassett, England manager, could both be written straight off the back of the tabloid newspapers, the back pages of the tabloid newspapers in the UK, right? So
maybe so, but
so obviously
hats off to Mike Bassett, England manager, though. That had me creased when I went to see that.
it is fantastic. Actually, there's a book. I I haven't looked into this, but it's definitely because I was only focused on the books themselves. But there's a book that offers the template for that film. You know,
Right.
I'll need to see if I can find it for you. But I've actually, because since the book was published, I've been in touch with the guy who wrote the book as well. You know, it's really funny. It's about an England manager as well. You know, I kind of take off Ron Atkinson. You know, like it's brilliant. Like, and other kind of cliched managers. You know, the cliches that these managers brought to the game. So I think Mike Bassett worked because Ricky Thompson was brilliant first. Do you know what I mean? And the parodies of the players in the book were instantly recognisable straight away as well. You know, which I thought was fantastic. Plus, as well, it was the kind of the first cab off the rank in terms of how you make fun of the phenomenon that was the kind of emergence of the English Premier League, you know, and the kind of super wages and the supercars and the super players, you know, like it was so it was tapping into a rich kind of vein of material to make its comedy. The Benson and Hedges, I thought was absolutely brilliant. You know, Brent, remember Benson and Hedges?
Were they players, or did he write his team sheet on? Yeah.
There were players that got called into the squad because he'd written the team sheet on a cigarette packet.
That's right.
You know, and like I'm pretty sure it was Phil Dupitis was the journalist. He was like, so who's on the next squad? Who's on the next squad? Is Lambert and Butler going to be playing and all that? You know, like just like stuff like that. Absolutely brilliant. You know, it's a cracker. That it's really good.
Brilliant
but there's
film.
like, but that's really exciting. I think first book's coming out, you know, and I think just getting a novel finished is a good start. And then I think that as writers now, we're under pressure to do lots of work around the books and that now as well. So it's great to come and talk to you about the work, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, I mentioned the Damned United. Obviously, that's one of the most kind of prominent football films and books of the last, well, probably ever. I know that you mentioned in your book another really prominent one that you view as kind of a watershed moment in football literature, Fever Pitch. Nick Hornby's work. I mean, I'm an Arsenal fan. I remember I didn't read the book, but I do remember watching the film maybe when I was like in my early teens. Tell us a little bit about how you view that as like shifting the landscape in football fiction.
So, Fever Pitch is probably one of the most important books about football that's ever been published. Even if you're not a fan of it or a fan of Arsenal, Hornby made writing about football in literary terms acceptable to mass audiences. And I think that it just landed just at the right time as a writer, because the kind of genre of the kind of sad, foppish, self-obsessed, like 30-something guy, you know, and like depression was something that people had started talking about a wee bit more, and those kind of stories, you know. What's his name? Characters that Colin Firth played, like it's funny that he's the guy in the film. Characters that he's good now, but he was terrible back in the days. Hugh Grant as well. You know, these kind of characters had come into prominence in the English kind of popular culture. So alongside this kind of caricature of himself, and alongside the kind of emergence of the EPL in 1992, same year the book was published, you know, and the kind of media hunger around any kind of gap filler between televised games for Sky in terms of the football meant that kind of rocketed that book into the stratosphere. And then so for the next 5 years, what you had was publishers just like fighting over texts to publish. Ian Plenderleith, a lovely fella writer, he wrote a collection of short stories called For Whom the Ball Rolls, instead of taking off Hemingway's title For Whom the Bell Tolls, right? And so you like I interviewed him when I was doing my PhD, and his take on this was brilliant. He said, look, honestly, if you were writing about football between 92 and 97, publishers would have published anything, you know, and it was just like, it sounds like this kind of wild frontier, this free-for-all, and it was like Hornby had finally legitimised football writing, you know, and so that's when people imagine that the first really smart football writers that we saw in newspapers kind of emerged around the same time, but people had been doing it before that. You know, Hugh McIlvaney had been writing about sport in really beautiful ways before that. There's a few other boys as well, Geoffrey Green, but like decades before Hornby was writing about football. He used to write these amazing kind of really colourful football descriptions as well, and even some of his predecessors, even more talented in that they had to literally phone in and dictate their sports report so that it could be typed up by someone in the office to get put in the newspaper, you know, in time for it to be published and stuff. Just like unbelievably clever. But he was the first guy where you could honestly say, that's completely legitimised football writing. Simon Cooper tried to get a football journal started up off the back of it. Like his book launched like a couple of dozen careers, you know, like David Winner's book about Dutch football emerged out of that time. And like people like Cooper and Hornby would tell you that wasn't the first book that did that. Pete Davis' book from 1990 about the Italia World Cup was probably the one that kind of paved the way for Hornby's book to be such a stellar success. But at the same time as that, at the same time as all those things were all happening, what you were starting to see was this kind of a brilliant culture of fanzines developing around football clubs, you know, that were really filled with brilliant humour, that were critical of the football institutions and the football clubs even themselves. Like, Not the View at Celtic must have been one of the early ones. I was buying that when I was 16, 17, going to the games and stuff, you know, and it was just like, I think it came out once a month, just like printed on A4 paper, stapled together with a cover, you know, like at like 50 pence at a game or something like that. And so Hornby's book emerged in the kind of wave of popularity around fanzines, football fanzines, EPL starting, in the kind of middle class embrace of football. Pete Davis, Italia 90, like it's not a coincidence that Italia 90, when it was hosted by the BBC, that they used Nessun Dorma as their theme music for that, you know. The singer Pavarotti, the singer, was already popular in the charts and all that, you know, and so it was kind of like it brought two disparate elements of culture together, and that book happened then. The book also arrived on the market and in the popular front of popular minds, as I said, with the EPL's emergence. But when the EPL started and people were buying season tickets and it was on Sky and all that, the middle classes, and particularly in the UK and other parts of Europe, embraced football in a way that they'd never embraced before. So it was like kind of having a football team was the kind of, it was a theorist said this, Jeff Hill, he wrote about Fever Pitch, and he said, having a football team was like a dinner party accessory. You know, so middle class people who had no interest in football and who'd never played it became Fulham supporters and stuff like that, you know, almost overnight. And Hornby's book emerged into that kind of this convergence of factors and made them really big. And like he's really kind of critical of it himself now. He's really grateful for the success the book's brought him because it relaunched his career. He was a school teacher before that, but he also resents the fact that the book made him this kind of football writer, and he spent the next decade trying to get as far away from that as possible, you know. So it's a good thing that he's went on to write some amazing film scripts and stuff as well since then. But so it's just a really, really important book. The football kind of biography was important up until that point, but after that book, like the writing about an aspect of football that wasn't a biography by a player or a manager became something, a thing. It became a thing on its own, you know. So we've got people writing histories of stadiums, football jerseys, the football boot, you know, like World Cups and all sorts of things. You know, my experiences as a fan became the kind of run of the mill almost. You know, there's a brilliant one by a guy who wrote a book about hooligans, away days. Kevin Sampson, and he wrote one immediately on the back of that. He was asked to write another hooligan novel, and he didn't. He wrote a book where he followed Liverpool, and it's probably, I reckon it's even better than the book about the hooligans, you know. And so if you wanted to know, like when you look at that book and why it was really important, it was for all of those reasons, not just because it's an interesting read, you know, but it's autobiographical, but it's too well structured not to have been manipulated in some way, you know, as well at the same time. There's a couple of theorists looked at it and stuff and critiqued it and that, but it's fantastic. And I reckon, so the most extreme example of where football stories like fiction and non-fiction collide, and I talk about this in the book, is the Zlatan Ibrahimovic autobiography that came out a couple of years ago. It broke the Swedish library system, you know, the electronic lending system that the Swedish library had put in place. It had to be completely redesigned and reinvented. The way they thought about fees and stuff had to be revisited because it was just such a popular book.
Wow.
And the guy, Ian Plenderleith, told me this story. He said, the guy who wrote, he was a ghostwriter for it, right? Spent a couple of days with him, Zlatan, you know, and then researched his life and stuff, and then just wrote a book, like kind of captured the essence of what he thought would be the Zlatan, you know. So Zlatan Ibrahimovic read it and went, none of this is true. And the guy said, I know, but it actually is like, what we're building here is like a myth. Do you know, like this is this is the story to tell, you know. And so
which
now
very much suits his persona.
Right. And now Zlatan, he wears that. Like, not that he didn't write the book, but he believes that's his story now. Do you know what I mean? So it's like this, so it's all this like this thing that's come into being as a result of this writer spending a few days with Zlatan Ibrahimovic and then writing a book that he imagines happened. You know, and now Zlatan's kind of embraced that as his own history, you know, a part of his own history. And so it's like we've come full circle now from making up stories for young boys in the late 1800s to making up stories about real footballers for fully grown men. Do you know, like,
and passing them off as reality as well.
You know, like so it's and that's, I think some of that is Hornby's building on the foundations that were there, but that book that it made Abramovich's biography possible because of the demand for it and how interested people are in football writing now across a whole range of things that they never were before. So that's why it's such an important book. I'm actually I read as much as I could about that people had written about Fever Pitch before I committed a single word of that book to paper, you know, because I loved the book when I read it in 1992. I loved it, but then when I read it again before I read the book, before I wrote the book, I found myself being really critical of it. You know, it's definitely a book of its time. It's so like it's just a massive whinge almost. Do you know what I mean? But there are some just stunningly brilliant moments in it. His coverage of the Hillsborough disaster is like just incredible. It's so empathic. Just I could hardly read it for the tears, you know. And that's a story that I've followed myself as a football fan, wanting justice for those people who were wrongfully accused of the kind of stupidity that was exacted upon them by South Yorkshire police, you know. And so it has all these brilliant elements in it as well. But that's why it's a brilliant book. It's a brilliant book. If you haven't read it, you should definitely read it. But as an Arsenal fan, I think they gave him away one season as part of the season membership package, didn't they? I think they gave people a copy of it.
I've never had a season ticket.
No, I think they gave it to people. And the reason why that sort of stuff's all still fresh in my mind is because we'd just written an academic paper about that and the two films that they made after as well. So they made a film about it.
They did a baseball version, didn't they, with was it Drew Barrymore?
Aye, Drew Barrymore. So it's brilliant, right? Because listen to this. This is amazing, right? So the Fever Pitch book is based around the climax of the book's around the season Arsenal won the league, you know, against Liverpool, right?
Yeah.
And so the 1997 film is about that same night, you know, when when things went mad, you know, at the stadium. What was it called? Highbury, right? You know, things went mad around Highbury and all that. And then, so to turn that into a British film, an American film, they got these two kind of really steady-handed, experienced, old, successful scriptwriters to take the story that, because Hornby adapted the screenplay, so they took the story that he had adapted, gave him executive producer rights. I don't think he got near it again after that, and they turned it into this comedy, like this kind of slapstick romantic comedy that the Farrelly brothers directed, right? But while they were making the film, which was going to be released in 2005 and was released in 2005, they used the Boston Red Sox as the team, right? And just out of pure luck, right, the Boston Red Sox won the World Series while they were making the film, right? So because they'd already had pre-agreements to be in the stadium filming, so they actually got to use real footage of the crowds and people at those games and everything, you know, and it was almost like the kind of, by making a film about a team winning the league, you know, in kind of like really quite spectacular circumstances, you know, and then trying to repeat that experience, almost like fulfilled a prophecy, you know, like, and so the Boston Red Sox won the 2004 World Series while they were making a film, and it's just this kind of incredible parallel between the two stories and stuff. So that's what we're writing a paper about that now. We're actually writing a paper about the treatment of the women in the two films, because Drew Barrymore's character is probably the strongest of all the women in any three of the versions of the story, you know, and so it's like over time, without meaning to, they've made the female fan really prominent in the American film. So that's what we're writing about now. So that's why it's set right in my mind. You shouldn't have asked me about that, Arton.
No, I'm happy to get it out of you. It's funny because I'd forgotten that I'd even seen that film until I quickly looked it up before. I was like, oh, I've seen that. I didn't realise that it was the same thing. But
it's incredible, isn't it?
It is. So in recent years, like, what would you say has been like some of the strongest football fiction that's been out?
I look, even if you're not a Liverpool supporter, the Red or Dead book by David Peace that came out in, I can't remember what year now, absolutely spectacular, amazing, just it's proper literature as well, you know, it's absolutely brilliant. Anthony Cartwright, I think he's from Northern England, his first book, I loved it, Heartland, but another book that he wrote, his most recent novel about football, just absolutely stunning. I can't even remember what it's called now. I'm just looking on the shelf to see if it's there.
Is it Iron Towns?
Iron Towns. Aye, honestly, absolutely fantastic. Really, really brilliant book. A collection of short stories that came out in 2002 called The Hope That Kills Us, that was edited by Adrian Serrell. Absolutely brilliant. The Damn United book, you should do yourself a favour. It's a fantastic book. A book that came out in 2011 by a Scottish writer called Alan Bissett. It's about a group of Rangers supporters that travelled to Manchester for the fated Europa League final in Manchester when the riots happened and the Rangers fans shredded the place. And I'm not like that's a stunning book about masculine culture, football culture, toxicity and the violence associated with it. Absolutely brilliant. Another brilliant one called Natural by Ross Raisin as well, which is about all sorts of things, about sexuality. The character's homosexual at the start, you know, and not at the start, throughout the novel and struggling with that as well. It's just incredible, absolutely fantastic book as well. So even if you just looked at in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been some, like, not just average genre fiction, there's been some really brilliant writing related to football. So those are just some, and I'm just looking at the shelf there. Oh, if you like crime fiction, sadly he's dead now, but Jeremy Kerr's trilogy, I think the first one's called the January Window, something like that it's called. And then there's the third one's called The False Nine, I think. And then there's another one as well. And they're about a club called London City, but I'm pretty sure it's Chelsea that's the model for the club. But he obviously didn't want to talk about a real club, so he talks about a fictional club, And so it's a belter. Those are fantastic crime novels, let alone football novels. So there's some real recent ones that are all really good,
So my first guest on, I asked him what his favourite football fiction was. He couldn't think of one. He's written a football travel book, and he nothing came to mind. He hadn't read anything. With you, I don't suppose I'll have that same issue. So, what's your personal favourite?
The Robin Jenkins, 1954, Thistle and the Grail.
Okay.
Robin Jenkins is one of the most underrated writers in Scottish literature. He's just an incredible writer, and he wrote 2 novels about football. One's The Thistle and the Grail, which is about a team in the 1950s. Mind you, it feels like it's set in the 1930s, but on the West Coast. And then in the book that came out in 1978, A Would-Be Saint is about what do you call it, when a conscientious objector, when he didn't go to the war.
Yeah.
And so it's about this guy who's struggling with his faith and stuff, It's a cracker as well, but he's a stunning writer. So, but definitely The Thistle and the Grail. That'll always be my favourite, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. It's a good place to wrap up. Again, to thank you for writing a definitive work on football in fiction. We'll also have to check out Never Say Die, the book about the history of women's football in Australia. Where would people find the books if they so please?
So the football fiction books, Football in Fiction, A History, was published by Routledge. It's part of the Critical Football Studies series. There's a few of them in it now by brilliant guys, Dan Parnell, Paul Widdup, Stacey Pope. I'm sorry, I can't remember one of the names.
No, it's okay. I can post some links.
Loads of really brilliant stuff. Jamie Cleland. So there's a brilliant series there about like so many different aspects of football and writing about football, but not like fiction, but actually these guys are looking at fandom, they're looking at the business of football, all that stuff. It's a fantastic series if you're interested in the academic side of things. I'll be publishing more stuff about football fiction soon. Have you heard of the podcast The Offensive?
I've heard of it, yeah. I've not listened to it.
I have a listen to it. It's hits and misses, but it's generally over the piece. That I've been through the 2 seasons now. Brilliant. That's definitely one that's worth listening to as well. And the reason I like that is because it's football in a different form. Like it's football fiction in a different form again. It's not television. It's not word text. It's audio. And it's a kind of almost feels like a radio play, but some of it's really funny. And it has a brilliant kind of a scathing kind of take on professional football. So definitely want to have a look at too.
Well, again, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure to talk. We could speak for hours. We were speaking for about half an hour before we even started recording. So thank you very much. I'll call time here on episode 2 of Over the Lines. Thank you for listening, and be back on soon.